Hey, what's up, everybody? Lieutenant Adray back at it again with the Lobo Pack podcast. Today we have a awesome guest. We have Captain Garcia. He's the APMS here, sir. It's an honor to have you on the podcast. Adjutant General Officer. We're looking for just about everybody to get on, so hopefully we'll get more. But yeah, if you don't mind, go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself to start it off.
So, of course, my name's Chris Garcia. Currently a captain. Hopefully that'll change here. Results come out soon. We'll get that next little bump. A little bit about me. I am actually an Albuquerque native, born and raised here, as well as that as a Lobo alum. Graduated out of here at UNM in 2014, commissioned out of the Lobo Battalion. So it's definitely interesting to be back on this side of the table, but at the same time, it's great to be back home and see how the program overall has changed, both good and bad, and leave hopefully an impression on both sides as both a cadet and cadre. A little bit more about me. Been in uniform in one way or another for a little over 22 years now. First enlisted active duty in the Marine Corps in 2002. Started my career there. Had grand ambitions of being an officer, being a pilot. Things kind of changed a little bit. Life evolved. However, I still never lost the desire to be an officer. Got out of the Marines after a stint, moved over to the New Mexico Air National Guard, where I was an F-16 crew chief. Started reevaluating again. I was like, okay, I want to get that commission. How can I do it? Air Force, Marines, Navy told me no, and a chance run-in with essentially the recruiting staff, and that was here at the time, over at the sub, led me to switch branches yet again, joined the Army, and commission. So it's been an interesting journey so far.
So you brought it up a ton there, sir. Just to go back, where'd you go to high school, and were you always in Albuquerque?
So yes, born and raised here in Albuquerque. Graduated Cibola 2001. Believe at least to our previous room, Mr. Savini, I was the first Cibola grad who commissioned out of the program. So don't know how true that is, but I'm going to take that. I'm going to take it like, yes, laying more legacy behind. Like I said, ran off to the Marines pretty soon after graduating high school. And then, as much as I love New Mexico, kept coming back multiple times.
And then, so you joined the Marines. Any reason why the Marines? Was your family in the Marines?
No. So my family, well, I take that back. I had an uncle and a great uncle who were both in the Marines. One was in Korea, the other was in Vietnam. My grandfather, well, both my grandfathers, one was Navy in World War II, and the other one was Army in Korea. My parents never served. So I was kind of the first one again, but the Marines was, let's be honest, the Marine dress blues are amazing. And at the time, I wanted to be a pilot and I wanted to fly the Harrier. So only two branches of military in the world at that time flew the Harrier, and that was the U.S. Marines or the British Royal Marines. So that's why I went to the Marines. That was my ultimate goal.
Okay. And then what'd you do in the Marines?
So I was CBRN, or NBC at the time, so nuclear, biological, chemical, ran the gas chambers, did all the fun training with gas masks, mop gear, and then had really no idea at the time kind of why I chose NBC. The recruiters made it sound amazing. All recruiters just are great, so they never lie, and I did that. Was lucky enough to go to Okinawa for my first duty station. Loved every second of it. Just a great experience, especially at 20 years old, to be in a foreign country on my own and just seeing what is out there in the world and, of course, serving my nation.
That's awesome, sir. So how long did you serve in the Marines before you decided to go into the Air National Guard?
So I did 5 years in the Marine Corps, got out, learned a lot of good and bad lessons at the time from my time in the Marines, but figured, I'm like, you know what, I did my part, did a deployment to Iraq in 2005, and I was like, okay, let me see what the civilian world is now. I grew up a little bit, got out, realized that I missed the camaraderie and the brotherhood that is in the military. Anybody that's served for a little while understands that shared passion, drive, having to work together to get through the hard times. So I missed that. Realized that there was really nothing in the civilian side. Started college again, and it's like it just felt different. So I decided I was going to reenlist. But part of that growth was realizing, hey, even though I love the Marine Corps, that's a part of me forever. I want to do this a little bit differently. I want to get something more out of it. Of course, the quality of life in the Marines is legendary. It is not the greatest. That's part of what builds the mystique of the Marines. It definitely does. It builds the mystique. This is why they're so great in the field. They're so great in adverse conditions. Is you kind of live it 24/7. But this time I was like, let me go someplace a little bit better, someplace I can get some better technical skills, a little better quality of life. I remember on my first deployment when I was literally in foxholes next to vehicles out in the desert, living like that. And then, of course, I see those in the Air Force, they're getting brand new bases built for them. They're living in hard stand buildings with things like air conditioning. I was like, that's the life I want. So still wanted to continue my college degree. I wasn't ready to go back full time. So went to the Air Guard here. Always loved aircraft, wanted to still be a pilot. So I was like, these guys here, the Tacos had F-16s, and it was something that it's like, okay, I can leverage this and continue to find opportunities and chase that dream, even if it's got a little side railed or delayed. I was still going to chase it. I wasn't going to let it go. So went to the Air National Guard. Started doing that for roughly 3 years. Had a good time, learned a lot, got to experience a flight. I got an incentive flight, so I've been in the back of an F-16.
In the back, so there's the two spots in it.
Yeah.
So one's for the pilot and then one's for our weapons.
So F-16.
How does that work?
So F-16 is a single-seater fighter, but they have trainers. So the trainer is essentially just a second seat in the back. They have the full controls as the pilot would be, and that's what they do. Is we had, I think it was 3 at the time in our wing here at Kirtland, and our wing commander's guidance at the time was anybody that went to a professional school and was an honor graduate got to go have an incentive flight. So I did my initial training, becoming an F-16 crew chief, and I was the honor grad, so I got to go for a flight. Fun thing about that too was that was also at the time that they were filming Transformers. So the very first Transformers movie, if you look at the desert battle scene that's in Egypt or whatever, was actually filmed down in White Sands, New Mexico. And all the F-16s that were used there came from the Tacos. So also got my 15 minutes of fame in a movie, although you really can't see me. But I like to point out which plane I was at. And that was me that, of course, dropped the bombs and did all the fun stuff.
That is pretty cool, though, still. Yeah, I didn't know that you got the opportunity to go do that. But it's really cool because it's like just working your ass off for something and then getting the opportunity to go and do it.
Yes. So I think one of the biggest things that I've done is, because people ask me a lot, like, why did you change branches so much? How come you've done this? Because I try to go after opportunities. And sometimes opportunities aren't along the traditional path. Sometimes you have to look, think outside the box, like, okay, how can I further, not just my career, but like my goals, my dreams. And, sometimes you have to take risk. So in this case right here, going back into the Air Force, I had to take a step back in rank just to join, because I left the Marines as an E5 sergeant. Time guard was like, well, we can't let you in as an E5. You can only come in as an E4. I was like, okay, I think in the end it'll be worth it because I'm going to get experience. I'm going to be able to still pursue my goals of commissioning and becoming a pilot. And this is, it's one step back, but hopefully, 2 to 3 steps forward. So I was willing to take that risk. And I think it paid out because I learned. I obviously got the flights, which was a once in a lifetime experience. And it was something that still taught me more on how to pursue what I wanted in life. I wasn't going to let the roadblocks stop me. So continuing on with the Air Force, when I was like, okay, I'm ready. I want to go back. I was taking a college course here and there, working regular 9-to-5 job. It's like, okay, I'm ready. I'm in a spot where I can pursue the college degree, which is needed for commissioning. And I'm going to chase that dream of being a pilot. sat down with the Air Force ROTC here, actually at UNM. At that time, they told me, "Hey, great, we love your experience. However, we cannot accept you." At the time, you had to have a STEM degree. They weren't taking anything else, and you had to be ready to commission, graduate by the age of 30. There were no age waivers at that point in time. There was no way I could do it. I was 28. There was just no way I was getting a STEM degree in 2 years, and not having some sort of a going crazy at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm not going to let this stop me. So I'm going to talk to the Marines again and the Navy, still here at UNM, and they were just like, "You're too old. Unfortunately, you're at an age where we can't accept you." And things have changed a little bit since then, but they're still very strict on their age limits, unlike the Army. So feeling a little bit defeated in that aspect, I actually had a chance run-in with the Army ROTC recruiters at the sub. They were doing a tabling event and didn't really have any inclination at the time to go into the Army, mainly because I'd always given one of my uncles, who was an Army vet, a hard time about how the Marines were better than the Army. I knew that if I joined the Army, he was just going to do nothing but clown me. Lo and behold, here I am. So, and he absolutely did clown me. So, but it's still worth it in the end. I had that chance run in. They were, they're like, "Nope, you're young enough. You actually don't need an age waiver, because we don't start age waivers so much later in the 30s. And, we just want a college degree. We're not so much worried about the type of college degree. It's the fact that you got one." Of course, historically, the college degree being a requirement for commissioned officers, the education was that fact that you were able to commit to something, see it through, do the research, put in the actual work to get the piece of paper, which is what they want in officers. We're not the most educated people. We're not the smartest one out there. There are people, it doesn't matter if it's a brand new private or whatnot, that are way more intelligent out there. There's always someone like that. But it's the fact that you can go through the steps. That's what they want with that commission, the commissionee having a degree. So I'm like, okay, let me think about it. Talk to my leadership in the Air National Guard. They were actually very supportive of it. They were like, "No, we'll work to get you out," because I was still under contract, only halfway through, "and we'll work to get you out and get you to switch you to the New Mexico Army Guard side of the house." So luckily, being that I was just switching components but staying on the New Mexico Guard, it was a relatively easy process. Switched over, and I started my cadet life. Originally, because I was prior service, they brought me in as an MS3. However, due to where I was starting at academically, I had to be realigned, and I started as an MS2, which at the beginning I was kind of like, "Why am I starting as a 2? I'm so much more advanced. I should be a 3." But hindsight being 2020, I realized that was the right step. Because yes, I had experience as an enlisted soldier, but the experience of what we're looking for here for the cadets was not there. So I was able to refine and learn. So again, right? Sometimes you got to take that risk. You've got to take a step back to be able to move forward. So started as an MS2, and did pretty well. Ran through all the times here, through the MS2, 3 and 4 year, commissioned in 2014. Unfortunately, I was not able to go after being a pilot. At the time, my vision actually was enough to disqualify me. Have since gotten LASIK and fixed all that, but the ship to being a military pilot, unfortunately, has long since sailed. However, I was able to get the dream of being an officer, which is the main dream I had back in high school when I first started really looking at becoming and joining the military.
So why decide to become an officer? Did you have family that was officers, or was it a status thing, or why were you interested in becoming an officer, sir?
So, no, everyone in my family was enlisted. I mean, historically, I've got one general. Well, but we go back to that's the Spanish Army, circa 1300s. So a little before I was around, but all my family was always enlisted members of the military. The first officer. Firstly, it was because I wanted to be a pilot. So obviously, to be a pilot, you had to be an officer. But I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to hopefully command one day, because it is an honor that not everybody gets. And to be chosen to command is a privilege. So still working for that aspect. But yeah, that's why I want to be an officer. At the time, I told myself I was never going to retire until I had a star on my shoulder. Don't know if that's still going to be the thing, but we'll see how it plays out for the next couple of years.
Definitely. So you've gone through 2 services. What did you start off doing as an officer?
So commissioned out of UNM at 2014 reserves as a signal officer. At that time, when I was notified that I was going to be going to the reserves, I looked at what I could get that would help me along in my life. So IT was in my mind like, okay, even though this isn't my degree path, IT I know is a great civilian job. It will lead to prosperity, help me make my family. At the time, I had a newborn son. So this is a job that I can do that will help me along. So I chose Signal the Reserves. Went to Bullock, got a bunch of education, professional certificates, like really good certificates that I wanted to leverage once I got home and started looking for that civilian job. Did all that, enjoyed it, really actually enjoyed the signal life. However, my reserve unit, I didn't get to do as much signal stuff as I had hoped for. Our battalion were OCTs, so they are the observer coach trainers. So we were evaluating soldiers that were getting ready for deployment, not too unsimilar to what I'm doing here as an APMS. So we would teach them some of the basics, help refine their already held knowledge, watch them, give them tips, and tell them how to get better and get to where they are ready to actually function as warfighters downrange. So got to do that for a couple of years. So because of that, I didn't really touch signal, unfortunately. And
so as an observer trainer, so you're helping them get ready, but are you drawing from your knowledge base as a signal officer on like how communication networks are set up and things like that, or is it an entirely different job?
So it definitely does draw on that. So with the job that I was doing, especially as a brand new lieutenant in the signal world, I didn't have a ton of experience. So what I was going through was at the beginning was staff officer work, where I learned how to be in the staff, which is where we will all be at one point in our careers. But then I learned how to do the evaluation process. So I had NCOs that were on my signal team, vastly more knowledgeable, had way more experience on all of the components than I absolutely did at that point in my time. So I leveraged them for the actual technical knowledge. Of course, I had my training from Bullock, which gave me a good foundation to build from. I had all of my books, my technical manuals. Again, right, going back to why officers are supposed to have a college degree is because we're able to research. We're able to put in that work of, let me pull off this book, even though I know that this is going to be the most mundane thing I've ever read, but pull the information that's relevant out of it. So I would go through that. I would talk to my NCOs to build up my knowledge, and then we would evaluate how those units that were coming through our process understood, were able to set up, follow the technical manuals, understand how to troubleshoot, and function as signaleers or just running signal equipment, whether it's a simple radio, a Blue Force tractor at that time, or the JBCP, and get them ready to go downrange. Cause the units that were coming through our stuff were all reserve and National Guard. So similar to me, they do it 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year type situation. And unless they're also doing that type of work on the civilian side, it's not as fresh in their memories. So most of it was refreshers, and then just like, hey, look at this, you're doing this correct from what we are observing. And then ultimately it was built into the deploying units commanders need and want for the OCTs to actually get after them. So we were never trying to sharpshoot them or prove we knew more than them. That was normally not the case. It was, are you doing the steps correctly? Are you going through the checklists? Are you doing what we would expect the unit to do with this equipment?
The New Mexico National Guard, or New Mexico Reserve Unit, that's the OCT unit. And because I talked to Agent Mercado a few weeks ago, being an OCT and things like that. Mm-hmm. Are you traveling a lot for that, and what does that look like?
So on the reserve side, it's a little bit different than on the active duty side. So for us, I was actually based out of Denver, which is where my unit was headquartered out of. But that battalion and that brigade, 5th Armor Brigade, actually was all over the country. So our main mission was actually out of Fort Bliss in Texas, and that's where we were mobilized and we ran the mission. But we could be requested by reserve units that wanted OCT support. So if they had done the request, there's a unit in Louisiana that wanted OCTs to monitor training for maybe their 2 weeks. They would put the formal request through the Army channels, and then we could be tasked, or whatever OCT unit that could support, be tasked to go down to Louisiana. And then you're on Army orders, you travel down there. I did a little bit of TDY before we were mobilized. Not too much traveling at that point. Just the mission for that unit. Because we were getting ready to mobilize, they didn't really use us as much because we were already trying to get ourselves prepped for that, because we had to be evaluated as well prior to assuming the mission there at Fort Bliss and up at Camp McGregor.
Okay. Is that basically a staging area, Camp McGregor, that's over at Fort Bliss?
So you have Fort Bliss, which is obviously Fort Bliss proper is the main base there in El Paso. But McGregor is actually in New Mexico, just north of the border, and it is a huge training area. So that's where all of the Fort Bliss rifle ranges are at, all of their shoot houses are at, anything for the aviation brigade to train with, all of their tanks and armor to go do their gunnery. So it is a massive, massive training area. Part of it does house what we would call nice transient barracks. So units coming in and out that are there temporarily. There's several barracks out there. And then so the units that were getting mobilized to go down range live there for their first 3 weeks that they were with us. We would use the training facilities that were at McGregor, so rifle ranges, driving ranges, gas chambers, etc. Get them prepped, and then they would fly out of Fort Bliss, because there was the main airport there at Fort Bliss for the military flights. But we would use all those facilities, and again, it was any of the reserve or National Guard units that were just scheduled to depart. So we had people from all over the country come through our lanes.
All right, cool. So after, how long were you in that uniform before you decided to go active duty, sir?
So I always wanted to go active duty, and I was always looking. Literally from the day that I commissioned into the reserves, I was looking at how I could get onto, whether it's just, active duty orders, whether it's full active duty, 1 year here, 1 year there. I wanted to be an active duty officer. I wanted to lead soldiers as my full-time job and career. And I felt that was my calling. That's what I wanted to do. Always looking for how to get in there. And in doing so, I started researching all of the different programs that the Army used to bring people onto active duty, whether it is temporarily, which we call ADOS orders. So those can be anywhere from 30 days to just under 2 years, depending on what the need is for. Or what I was hoping for was to get back as a normal Title 10 active duty officer. So I did my 1 year mobilization. We left active duty status, went back to the reserves. I actually switched units to a unit here in Albuquerque that was stationed on Kirtland, a quartermaster battalion. Knew some Lobo alumni that were there who helped bring me over, because at that time, being a signal officer, went to a quartermaster unit, and like, oh, well, we don't really need signal guys. However, we can use a officer that wants to train and lead and be a part of the program versus someone that's just there. So ran into, like I said, Lobo alumni. My mentee, when I was an MS4 and he was an MS3, was there. We ran into each other again. We were both PLs together. It's great. The Lobo connection is everywhere. I still talk to him, and it's been 12 plus years. So that year in 2017, President Trump wanted to expand the size of the Army. And so one of the programs that I knew about during all this time was called the Call to Active Duty program. Up until this point, it had always been onesie twosies for officers to come on to full active duty. It was critical MOSs that were in short demand, aviator warrants, cyber people, stuff like that. So it was never a massive program that I could leverage at the time, but I always watched it. Well, President Trump was in office for the first time. He wanted to expand the Army, and so that program just got smashed wide open. And at that time, it was, for me as a lieutenant, it was any lieutenants that were MOS qualified, so that had gone through Bullet. Any captain that had gone through Triple C, any major that had been through ILE. And so I was like, I meet the requirements. I put in my packet, requested, and about 4 months later, I got the official notification that I was selected, and I've been active duty ever since. Army gave me my choices of where to go, which was Fort Gordon at the time, now Fort Eisenhower, Fort Huachuca in Arizona, Korea, and then Fort Bragg. Looking at my options, I chose to go to Fort Gordon. Being a signal leader that is home signal, I was like, perfect. I'm going to go back. This will be great. I'll be part of a signal unit. I will be able to refresh my signal knowledge because I had not really used it up from Bullet to that point in my career because I was an OCT. Wasn't hands-on on equipment. And then I was in a quartermaster unit where I was learning log packs, doing water, fuel, resupply, learning how to do aerial resupply of fuel to helicopters. So no signal-related tasks. So I'm like, this is going to be, I think, the best place for me. I can relearn, refresh, and I'm back in active duty. I'm amongst soldiers. So in 2017, packed up the family, and we moved to Fort Gordon in Georgia.
So how did that really work? So you got orders because you're a signal officer.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a signal officer still, or did you have to choose a new branch to AG, or how did it work from there? Because you got a duty station, but yeah, what does that have to do with your job?
So at that time, I was still straight signal officer.
Okay.
I was a 25 Alpha, and that's what I was going to go do. I was assigned to 35th Signal Brigade, the premier signal brigade in the Army, of course. And I was just a 25. As I was getting ready to pick up captain, I started doing my own internal evaluations, self-evaluations of where I was at in my career, what I was looking at for not the promotion to captain, but for the next one, for the promotion to major. So in 2019, when I promoted to captain, that was the first year that the Signal Corps had gone above 50% selection rate to major. Very selective. Signal is one of those branches that gets very smaller at the top, so you have to be competitive. You've got to be good. Being that I had realistically only had a year and a half, 2 years of signal experience, I wasn't so sure that I would be very competitive for major. I didn't have any doubt that I wouldn't do good, but you had to really excel to try to get major. So as I was looking at that, kind of like what I've done in the past, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to make a choice and figure out the best path for me to continue my career. I didn't want to get to that point of like, hey, thanks for your service, but you didn't get selected for major, and you're shown the door. Especially since I've already committed more than half my life to the military. Well, fortune was in my favor, I think, a little bit again. That year, I was able to use another program that I had learned about from the Army, which is called the VTIP program. So VTIP is your Voluntary Transfer Incentive Program. And it is one of the few ways that us as officers can actually change our branches. So where enlisted soldiers can re-enlist to be reclassified, or if their branch is changed up a little bit, they can reclass to a new MOS. Officers were essentially, we pick one, and outside of maybe a branch detail officer who is, as a lieutenant, maybe infantry, and then switches over to a different branch, there's really no way for us to change branches, right? So it's a program that I knew about that I was able to use. And so that year, they were actually able, or signal was over strength. So I made the decision to switch branches. Like, okay, Signal is saying that I can switch branches. They have a surplus of signal officers for my year group. So I'm like, so if they're already at a surplus, that makes it even harder for that promotion to major. So I looked at the different branches that were in either a shortage that wanted people, or I'm like, okay, where can I leverage my previous experience? So AG was one that I thought I could leverage previous experience. So going back to my time in the reserves as a lieutenant, one of the jobs that I ended up doing was in the HR world on the civilian side. I got to work at Santa Fe here. I ran a couple local programs that helped distribute funds to needy families. I helped run HR for the Santa Fe County. So I, going back to that experience, I'm like, I can pull from this and leverage it in Army HR. Also, a little bit selfishly, their promotion rates were much higher to major, where Signal was at cracking the 50%. They were averaging 78%, which is even higher than the Army average. So I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And it was a gamble because I had no prior AG experience, as most of my peers did at Captain's Career Course for the AG Schoolhouse. And I was already knew that. I was like, okay, I've got to work even harder because I have to overcome the fact that they've got 4 years of knowledge and experience, and I don't. So laid it out, looked at all the pros and cons, applied through the VTIP program, was accepted. And so about a month before attending Triple C, I got official notice that I was now a 42 Bravo Adjutant General Officer, and my signal time is now my secondary MOS.
Okay. So having that, did you go immediately to Adjutant General Triple C and Fort Jackson, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I promoted to captain. One of the things about the VTIP program is you have to be a first lieutenant promotable. This is the first time that you can actually apply for that program. So that year, because there were so many other officers that came up through the call to active duty program, unlike other times where the promotion list comes out and then you're waiting for your sequence number to be promoted, and that could be anywhere from a couple months to maybe a year. This year, there were so many officers that came on the active duty program that they actually started promoting people a month early. And so by the time that the list came out, I had already passed my promotion date. So I didn't have I was never a first lieutenant promotable. I was first lieutenant, boom, captain.
Huh.
And with that, I put in my paperwork to transfer over. And so I was promoted in September. Yeah, so because the list came out in the end of August, I was promoted in September, and then in December, I was official that my VTIP was approved. I was now an adjutant general officer, and in January I went to AG Triple C. So it was very, very short window for all of that.
And then how was your time at AG Triple C? What was your experience like learning? And then you had other officers that have been doing that for the past few years. What was it like interacting with them?
So definitely unique. This was also when COVID first started really blowing up. So we were in much smaller groups than we probably would have been, which I think in this case it actually helped me because instead of being lost in a potential sea of AG officers, our small group was able to really lean on each other and learn. So in my group, I was not the only non-AG or what we call AG peer officer. We had two others that were branch detailed. One was infantry to AG, and the other one, she was FA to AG. And then the other three in our group were all AG peer. They had commissioned AG officers and lieutenants. So we were able to really learn from them, pick their brains on the daily life of an AG officer. Like, what are we really doing? Pulling reports. How do we actually function? Because when you get to a career course, they've already assumed that you know those features. They sit there, and we were not really doing a day in the life of the AG officer. So even though we had maybe about overall in the class 30% of branch transfers into the AG world, we did not learn that day-to-day stuff. So we had to rely on our peers to really help show us the way. We picked their brains, we looked at their products, all of their how-to and cheat sheets, which I still probably have most of them, and I look at a lot of them still to this day, even though now I've got more experience, because it was good stuff that helps me along the way. But then at the same time, they were able to pull from, my knowledge. They were able to pull from the other knowledges on, the combat MOSs or the support MOSs that were outside of the S1 AG world to help broaden their understanding of the Army as a whole. And that's one of the good things about these schools is you're able to see Because some people, I don't want to say they're stuck in one unit, but they may be stuck in the same type of unit and they don't get to ever see. So, you're part of an infantry unit. You don't see how an aviation or a uh, transportation unit operate. So, getting that experience, even if it's still in the AG world, you're able to see and get that broader picture, which helps develop all of us as leaders, as officers, as staff officers, and hopefully commanders.
Definitely. So after your time in AG Bullock, where'd you go from there?
So because of my timeline of when I promoted and when I transferred branches and when I went to school, I was unable to participate in our marketplace for finding jobs on the officer side. So those that are not real familiar with how the Army operates right now, maybe they've been talked to from people in the past. The Army sends you wherever. Nowadays we kind of almost shop around for our positions. We get interviewed, and we have a lot more say in where we're going than how it was back in the old days, where it was like, hey, that's where you're going, that's it. So I didn't get none of that. I was needs of the Army. Originally, I was going to be going to the Aviation Brigade at Fort Riley. I was like, okay, never been to Kansas, all part of the adventure. Well, Triple C, our branch managers from HRC came down, and we got to talk to them and do little stuff. I remember talking to my branch manager about trying to get a little bit closer to New Mexico for my family. Well, we had probably about it was less than 30 days from graduation, already prepared to go to Kansas. My branch manager calls me up, says, hey, I remember that she said, did you want to try to get closer to New Mexico for your family? We just had a position open up. You can go to Fort Bliss in Texas, still the Aviation Brigade. And I said, yes, I'll take it. Jumped on that thing, even though it was a huge shift that I had to prepare the family for in less than 30 days to move now to a completely different part of the country. But we chose that, went to El Paso, and I had such a great experience out there. It was my first time as an AG officer in the force, as an S1. I got lucky enough that I had some great NCOs to help me off the bat. I had great specialists and PFCs that were in my S1 section that, as I told them, I was bluntly honest, I'm like, hey, my S1 experience is Captain's Career Course. That's it. And being a customer to the S1. They took it upon themselves to teach me. So one of the things that I've always loved doing throughout my entire career is learning from those that I'm working with. Doesn't matter what their rank is, doesn't matter where they are in the hierarchy compared to me. I always try to go and learn from them. So if they were my seniors or my juniors. And I would always sit and do the work with them. I learned early on in my career that a working leader is the type of leader that I wanted to be. Somebody that's not just giving direction and then sitting back in the office, but like, hey, here's our task, here's what we're going to do. And then I'm out there doing it with them, as well as giving them the guidance and what needs to be done. So I sat on the S1 floor and I learned from them. I had, a PFC over my shoulder checking my work, making sure that I was doing things correctly. At that point in my career, I was at 18 years, a captain, having a PFC who'd been in for maybe 2 years, teaching me. And I could care less that that's, the dynamic of it. Most of the time people might see that and want to flip it like, wait, you're supposed to be teaching them. Like, yes, but I can absolutely still learn from them. And so I worked alongside them all the time. I had two offices at that unit. I had my main office in the command suite where I was doing most of my other, AG work. But then once a week, I made it a point to go onto the floor, sit at one of the cubicles, help soldiers with their day-to-day issues or concerns, or help them prep their HR packets, their personnel files, which again, I think to me gave me a greater insight into the unit, gave me how I could focus my soldiers in the S1. Okay, we're seeing this type of a trend. We're going to try to get ahead of it. And plus, it gave me a much better working relationship with my S1 soldiers. They saw that I was not unwilling to do the same work, the same tasks that they were doing. So spent 2 years in El Paso, learned a great deal. The staff there for the aviation support brigade where I was part of essentially became the XO, the S3, and me. And we were the ones that did the majority of the planning for the entire battalion. So I learned outside of just the S1 work too, which was a great experience. My time there was coming up, and again, my family really wanted to try to come home for a little while, as best we could. They were a little homesick. My kids wanted to see their grandparents, so I started looking at how can I get home? How can I be up here in Albuquerque or get as close to? There are no Army bases here in Albuquerque, not many units on the active duty side here anyways. So started looking at what I could do. Is there another program to go on? Well, I learned about what's called the HAP. So that is the Home Base Advanced Assignment Program. I think I said that right. I always get that one messed up. What that does is you as the soldier agree to go do a 1-year dependent restricted tour. It means that you're going to probably one of the, not the nicest areas in the world. It's a hardship tour away from the family. In exchange for that, the Army is going to do whatever they can to get you to as close a possible point as where you want to go on the officer side. On the enlisted side, they give you a couple. You can either stay at the base that you're on. So say you're there, you really love it, and you want to stay there, great. Or they give you, up to 3 other choices of places that are guaranteed that you'll go to. But it's mainly the main to major bases. I worked with my branch manager who was able to pinpoint me to Albuquerque. At the time, I told him, hey, I just want to go to Albuquerque, anything that you can do. There were really 3 options for me, which was recruiting command, the MEP station, as an operations officer, or here, ROTC. So they said, hey, give us what order did you want? I'm like, I'd be interested to go to ROTC again, see what it's like. So put me at ROTC first, then put me for MEPS, and then recruiting command. I went to Kuwait for a year, came back, and my branch manager was able to work their magic behind the scenes, and they were able to pinpoint me to ROTC. So I had to take another gamble, another risk to get that opportunity. But ultimately, it led me to come home for about 3 years, which was great for the family. I was able to come and do something that really piqued my interest in terms of being an APMS. And ultimately, it brought me here to help guide the next generations of officers and hopefully help steer them in the right direction and teach them about taking risks, taking opportunity, as well as being there to do the exact same thing for their soldiers and teach their soldiers to do the same stuff. Again, I learned from my very first enlistment in the Marines. I didn't really come out of the Marines with a lot of knowledge or experience that prepared me for the civilian world. I just had nobody talk to me about it. And I didn't know what to ask being a 19-year-old kid. I'm like, well, all I knew was about college classes. I didn't know about industry certifications. I didn't know about technical skills and licenses that you can get out of the military. And I learned it the hard way that all that exists, and I got nothing. So I always told myself, whenever I'm in a leadership role again, or when I have the opportunity, even if I'm not directly leading somebody, to share that knowledge. And that's something that I've done from the Air Force to being a cadet, being in the Army Guard, to being in the reserves, to now being an active duty AG officer, is I take the time, I talk to my soldiers, and I figure out what are they looking for? How can I help them achieve it? And if they have no clue what they're doing, that's when I'm like, let's go start laying stuff out, because these opportunities exist. And then I work to try to get them, if it's within my power, to those opportunities, whether it's a school to get some chest candy, they want to go to airborne air assault, or an industry certification, or maybe to take college courses for a degree in a life that has nothing to do with the Army or AG. It's just making them a better person. And when you support your soldiers and get them in the right place in their life, or where they're on that path, they want to turn it around and pay it forward, whether that is paying it forward to the next person or repaying it to you and doing that extra work for you, taking care of you as a leader. I've had many times where I've told my soldiers, hey, you guys go home, enjoy your weekend. We've got some late minute taskers. I'm going to take them. And then I've had many times where those same soldiers have kicked me out of the office, telling me that no, it's their turn, they're staying, for me to go home. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, you did it once for me, I should do it for you. It was more of like, you support us, we're supporting you, type mentality.
Okay. Cool. Well, so it's really awesome to hear just how much the Army has, or just the military in general, your soldiers taking care of you, but you also taking care of your soldiers. It's a big, big thing. So leading from that, you get to come to, be an APMS here. What do you remember from the program back then, and how do you think it's changed? And
So I think the overall as a program, and from what I remember when I was on the cadet side of this house, is there's been a massive positive growth in this program. Beforehand, it wasn't as, I don't want to say cadet centered, but right now this is a very cadet led and cadre guided program. So the cadets take on a huge amount of responsibilities, which absolutely teaches them and gets them set up for that career as an officer, as a lieutenant, when they're doing this for real. And these brand new lieutenants are in a much better place because of that than I ever was when I first commissioned as a lieutenant. Because of that, like I said, that experience has taught them. We hold them to the same standards, whether it is Colonel Cunningham, myself, you, Sergeant Stanger, right? We absolutely hold these cadets to a standard that sets them up for success when they put on that gold bar. The program is obviously, we're in nicer digs. UNM supporting this program so much with basically a brand new building, which is awesome. So much nicer than what I had as a cadet when we were in a portable. The only plus side to that place, it was right next to Golden Pride. If you've never had Golden Pride, you're missing out. Great burritos and green chili stew. So I was secretly looking forward to having that, 3 feet away when I was coming back here. But I'll give it up for the facilities that we're in, because this is so much more of a conducive place to teach and learn. And being now on this side of the table, I'm able to pull from the experience that I had as a cadet, not just to help with the cadre, like, hey, when I was a cadet, we did this type of stuff. And people are like, oh, we haven't done that in forever. We didn't even remember that was an option for us. Or, getting input on how to leverage local support, whether that's JROTCs, veterans groups, stuff like that we can work with to help build up our program and build up these cadets. So I honestly would say that the program is leaps and bounds better than it was. And, not to put another feather in our cap, but I mean, we are the best small program in 5th Brigade. So we can't argue with that.
Yes, sir. The best program.
That's right. Absolutely the best overall.
Exactly. So, yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add before we do a formal, sort of send off?
No,
I think we've covered a lot.
No, I mean, it's like it's been the biggest takeaway is you got to look for opportunity, and sometimes opportunity is not where along the easiest path. Right? You can't be scared to do the research to find something else that you want, as well as teaching your soldiers to do the same, because you may miss out on stuff that you had no idea even existed until you start looking. Read the MILPER messages, go on to HRC, look at the regulations, and figure out how you can take control of your career, because you will always be the biggest advocate for your own career. You will have great leaders throughout your time that will advocate on your behalf, but nobody will be as big an advocate as you are. So put in the extra work, volunteer for extra duties or additional duties. Don't be the one that hides in the background. But at the same time, don't be a spotlight ranger. Be honest, work hard, and your career will take care of itself in that aspect. So look for those opportunities to further your own ambitions and dreams, so that way you can get it.
Sure. It's awesome that we got to talk to you today. and hopefully we'll continue to hear more. And yeah, just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast, sir.
Well, it's great to be here. Great to be here. Can't wait to see who's next.
Definitely. All right.
Yeah,